Good morning, everyone. Oh, good morning. Good morning, everyone. I know it's a rainy day in Washington, D.C., but we thank you all for being with us here today. Welcome to the Wilson Center. My name is Oge Onoborgu, and I am the director of the Africa program. Through in-depth research and analysis, public discussions, working group discussions, and briefings, the Wilson Center Africa program brings together policymakers, practitioners, and subject matter experts to analyze and offer practical options for tackling key challenges in Africa and US-Africa relations. Today, we're particularly honored to welcome the Foreign Minister of Nigeria, Ambassador Y.M. Tuggar, for this timely and important conversation on US-Nigeria partnership in the changing global arena. We also want to give a special welcome to the senior diplomatic delegation from the Nigerian Embassy in Washington, D.C., and the Nigerian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. Allow me to also recognize in the audience colleagues from across the U.S. government and several former U.S. ambassadors who have served in Nigeria and continue to follow events in the country very closely. As I look in the room today, and I also look at our numbers online, there are so many friends of Nigeria who have tuned in for this conversation today. And with friends in the audience, we know that there will always be interesting and interactive questions. Today's event comes on the heels of the recently concluded 6th US-Nigeria Binational Commission. So again, we look forward to a very, very engaging discussion. For our audience in the room and for those online, we encourage you to follow this conversation. Let me now turn it over to the Wilson Center Senior Vice President and Director for our International Security Studies Program, Dr. Robert Litvak. Dr. Litvak previously served on the U.S. National Security Council staff as a Director for Non-Proliferation. He has also held visiting fellowships at several institutions, including Harvard University's Center for International Affairs, the International Institute for Strategic Studies, and Oxford University. Rob? The podium is yours.
Well, thank you, Oge, and good morning. I'd like to extend a warm welcome to our speakers and our guests who are here with us in person and online. We are honored to welcome the Foreign Minister of Nigeria, Ambassador Y.M. Tuggar, to the Wilson Center. The Wilson Center is a unique institution in foreign policy in Washington. We're congressionally chartered, scholarship-driven, and fiercely nonpartisan, as our President, Ambassador Mark Green, puts it. Our special status brings with it certain obligations not to duplicate what others are doing, but instead to prioritize the most important issues and opportunities, and to do so in ways where we add value and make a difference. Nigeria is one of the United States' most important partners in Africa. As our second largest trading partner on the continent, our long-standing partnership with Nigeria is built on areas of shared interests and values, such as security cooperation, global health and development, and humanitarian response, as well as economic growth, democracy, and respect for human rights. Nigeria also has the largest population in Africa, with over 200 million people, about half of which are under the age of 30. This presents a tremendous opportunity to harness the energy and innovation of Nigeria's youth in its population, and to work with them to build the futures they envision for themselves, their country, and the world. This is Africa's time on the global stage, and as the continent's powerhouse, Nigeria has an important role to play. This presents us with many opportunities to further strengthen and deepen people-to-people ties between the United States and Nigeria, and to work together to tackle the critical issues ahead in shaping the future of Africa and U.S.-Africa relations. Today, we are excited to have the Foreign Minister with us to continue some of the important conversations from the Binational Commission that took place in Abuja just a few weeks ago. We look forward to learning about your foreign policy agenda and how the United States can partner with Nigeria to achieve some of the goals set out. Thank you for joining us today for what I know will be a lively discussion. I will now turn it over to the Acting Deputy Assistant Secretary of the Bureau of African Affairs, Richard Michaels, Rich Michaels is a long-serving member of the United States Foreign Service in a variety of overseas postings, and currently has the West Africa brief in the Bureau of African Affairs. So with that, my pleasure to turn the floor over to Rich Michaels.
All right, good morning, everyone. And thanks, Rob, for the introduction. I am grateful for the opportunity to represent the State Department this morning at this Wilson Center event featuring Foreign Minister Yusuf Tuggar during his visit to Washington. I returned from the US-Nigeria Binational Commission in Abuja 2 weeks ago with a renewed enthusiasm for the future of the United States' relationship with Nigeria. And having served in Abuja, going back is always a little bit of a homecoming. But it wasn't just me. The entire delegation, from Deputy Secretary of State Kurt Campbell to my boss, Assistant Secretary Molly Fee, to high-level officials from 10 agencies, left Nigeria energized. Witnessing the 6th Strategic Dialogue was a reminder of the tremendous opportunities that lie before our two countries as we work to build a more prosperous future for our peoples. The BNC discussions covered a host of bilateral and regional issues with the Nigerian government, civil society, and private sector representatives. Over 2 days, we developed robust plans for closer cooperation, including on efforts to ensure inclusive economic growth, deepen security cooperation, bolster civilian protection, support institutional capacity building, and facilitate Nigeria's leadership on the global stage. The wide range of topics discussed during the BNC and yesterday in a meeting between Deputy Secretary Campbell and Minister Tuggar serves as a testament to the breadth of our vibrant partnership. In fiscal year 2023, the U.S. government provided Nigeria nearly $1 billion in foreign assistance, advancing joint priorities in health, education, humanitarian relief, human rights and governance, economic development, peace and security, and clean energy. This level of support underscores the importance of our commitment to supporting Nigeria's efforts to address critical challenges that affect governance, security, and economic development, including food security, health, and education. In terms of tangible outcomes of the BNC, we announced the visit of the President's Advisory Council on African Diaspora Engagement to Nigeria in July, along with a symposium in Washington in October to bring together U.S. and Nigerian technology leaders. I am pleased to share that the US-Nigeria Air Transport Agreement, or Open Skies, entered into force on Monday. I want to extend my personal thanks to the Honorable Minister for his and his team's dedicated efforts to bring the successful BNC to fruition, and for traveling to Washington to continue his discussions with the U.S. government and other stakeholders. As Assistant Secretary Fee likes to say, the reward for good work is more work. And I can assure you that we are prepared for the exciting work ahead as we advance the economic, governance, and security priorities charted at the BNC. Of course, we are not naive about obstacles we must face, as security threats, democratic backsliding, and economic shocks challenge West Africa. Yet, Nigeria does not face them alone. The United States remains unwavering in our commitment to a steadfast partnership with Nigeria. Minister Tuggar's visit this week symbolizes our shared commitment to a dynamic bilateral partnership. We are taking a whole-of-government approach to support Nigeria's development and diversification as the giant of Africa works to provide the needs for all of its citizens. I am thankful for partners like the Wilson Center as we work together toward these goals, and I look forward to the discussion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Rich. Let me now introduce the Honorable Ambassador Y.M. Tuggar. Ambassador Tuggar was appointed in August 2023 as the 29th Minister of Foreign Affairs, Minister of Foreign Affairs of Nigeria. Previously, he served as the Nigerian ambassador to Germany from 2017 to 2023. Prior to his ambassadorial appointments, Honorable Tuggar was an elected legislator in Nigeria's National Assembly. As a key member of the Federal House of Representatives from 2007 to 2011, Honorable Tuggar led the House Committee on Public Procurement and played important roles on various committees, including Petroleum Resources, Foreign Affairs, Legislative Budget, and Agriculture and Rural Development. Honorable Tuggar has also held several positions in the private sector, including lead in indigenous oil and gas companies in various executive positions. He holds degrees from the United States and the United Kingdom. Ambassador, we are honored to welcome you here today to the Wilson Center to share your insights on Nigeria-US partnerships and to discuss Nigeria's new foreign policy vision. We look forward to your address today, and I invite you to please come up to the podium.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, very good morning to you. I would like to, first of all, express my gratitude to the Wilson Center for inviting me to speak today on this important topic, which is the evolving partnership between Nigeria and the United States in an ever-changing global arena. It is a great honor to address you on the continually evolving partnership between Nigeria and the United States in an ever-changing global arena. We find ourselves at a crucial juncture marked by unprecedented global challenges and transformative opportunities. Nigeria and the United States have a long-standing and robust relationship dating back to our independence in 1960. And since then, the relationship has continued to grow from strength to strength, as illustrated by our significant bilateral trade and cooperation on a wide range of issues. Just yesterday, as has been mentioned, I met with the U.S. Deputy Secretary of State, Kurt Campbell, as a follow-up to the very successful 6th Nigeria-US Binational Commission in Abuja to strengthen our partnership on economic growth, security, technology, energy, food security, and multilateral reform. Through engagements such as the Binational Commission, we can and are making progress as a partnership. Our shared values and ambitions, democracy, stability, and a commitment to addressing the needs of our peoples provide a strong foundation on which we can build. It is critical that we do so given the current state of international affairs. Today, we're witnessing an increasingly complex world shaped by conflict, growing polarization, breakdown of long-standing institutions, and significant multi-dimensional challenges, including climate change, terrorism, transnational crime, as well as widespread disinformation. Ongoing developments in the Israel-Palestine crisis continue to draw global attention. Nigeria, like the US, believes in a two-state solution, and we welcome efforts by the US to broker a ceasefire. But we must not underestimate the strength of feeling in the global South. This is a debate on the streets of Africa and Asia, and increasingly in America and Europe. Ordinary people see the images from Gaza and cannot fathom why America helps arm Israel, and yet hesitates to support other allies fighting with more restraint against similar radical ideologies. Similarly, there has been a widespread recognition in the US that the persistent conflict in Ukraine challenges the world community to uphold principles of sovereignty and territorial integrity. These are principles that are fundamental to the United Nations Charter and to which our nations are unwaveringly committed. Nigeria was among the first to support the UN General Assembly resolution to condemn the invasion of Ukraine. Our commitment to the principle of strategic autonomy is not counter to, but rather aligns with our conviction that the global system must be based on the pursuit of peace, stability, and inclusive development. As a student of international relations, I'm concerned by the seeming return of great power competition. The importance of neutral ground that provides decision makers and diplomats with the opportunity to meet and diffuse tensions cannot be overstated. Ukraine warns us of the terrible consequences when we miss that opportunity. Nigeria's history of overcoming differences and celebrating our diversity means that we can play such a role, a non-aligned conciliator, helping to cool temperatures and prevent dangerous escalation. In many ways, Nigeria is the canary down the coal mine. Insecurity in Nigeria is inextricably linked to instability in the sub-region, which in turn can have a severe impact on global stability through increased terrorism, proliferation of arms, human trafficking, and irregular migration. Looking back to the insurgency carried out by terrorist group Boko Haram, which peaked in 2014, it is easy to see how Nigeria's challenges had an outsized effect on the wider region. These are problems that are best fixed at source. The United States and the rest of the world cannot afford to wait until the problem is on its streets. As the medical profession teaches us, when faced with a potentially dangerous disease, it is better to treat the underlying cause and not just the symptoms. We've been fighting violent extremists for 15 years. We've seen the terrible human cost of conflict. The efforts of our gallant military and security officers have seen the terrorist group Boko Haram, as well as its offshoots, severely degraded. Nevertheless, the threat of terrorist organizations and armed groups exploiting instability remains. The decision by Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger to withdraw from ECOWAS threatens ongoing counterterrorism efforts and embolden military factions, as well as armed groups in the region. Well-meaning interventions by some states only exacerbated the situation and led to accusations that Nigeria and ECOWAS were vassals of foreign powers. More positively, we're beginning to see indications that the international community understands its interests are probably best served when it helps support African-led solutions to African problems. By contrast, allegations of human rights abuses and killings of Christians, some accurate, some not, fake news is very much a global phenomenon, have led countries like the US to refuse to provide Nigeria with necessary arms, undermining our ability to counter terrorism and other major threats. This must change. While we accept that there have been isolated incidents of abuse, the Nigerian army and security institutions, while fighting enemies that have used children as suicide bombers to attack markets and other soft targets, remain committed to human rights. In fact, in 2016, the Nigerian Army launched a human rights desk to better identify and respond to such cases. We're not perfect, but we investigate, we're transparent, and we act. We're a country under the rule of law and due process. Our country safeguards the freedom of religion, speech, and association. Nigeria is closer than it looks. The fragility of democracy, climate change, migration issues, the challenge of violent extremism, and other organized crime, these are America's issues, everyone's issues, and Nigeria is on the front line. To reiterate, the best way to fix the problem is at source. As a regional leader that has demonstrated its credentials and capacity to address insecurity, we need the weapons, equipment, technical support, and capacity building to counter terrorism, insecurity, and disinformation. But we're seeking partnerships, not handouts. Partnerships that can help keep our country and the wider region safe and stable, laying the foundation for sustainable growth, particularly in the wake of the African Continental Free Trade Area. The world is in a flux, but the relationship between Nigeria and the United States can transcend the challenges of today. Let us embrace the possibilities of tomorrow by promoting democracy, driving inclusive development, making the most of our demography, and strengthening links with our diaspora, in line with President Bola Tinubu's doctrine of 4D diplomacy. Together, we can endure an ever-changing global landscape and leverage our collective strengths to foster an environment that encourages real mutual benefit and upholds the dignity of our peoples. Together, as a spirit of unity and determination, with a spirit of unity and determination, we can chart a new path forward for peace, stability, and prosperity. Thank you all for your attention.
Thank you very much, Minister. I can imagine that there are a lot of questions in the room and online, as your remarks have really given us a lot to think on. I think you really stressed the fact that foreign policy in many ways is local, as the security concerns or the issues that we see in Nigeria are also connected to the broader regional concerns of insecurity as well. I wonder if you could, before I open it up to the audience for questions and gather questions online, I wonder if you could talk a little bit more about the 4Ds that you mentioned briefly in your remarks, especially given Nigeria's role in West Africa and the concerns we see about democracy backsliding in the region and Nigeria's current chairmanship of ECOWAS. If you could speak more about how this new foreign policy vision can be used, or how you're leveraging it to position Nigeria to lead in addressing some of the challenges that we see in West Africa today.
Thank you very much. So as mentioned in the speech, the 4Ds are the Tinubu administration's foreign policy agenda, and they are democracy, development, demography, and diaspora. And beginning with democracy, we are Africa's largest democracy with a population of 220 million people. We're expected to become 400 million in the year 2050, so the third largest country in the world. And based on the nature of our country, the way it came about, the way it evolved from people living in the confluence of two great African rivers, trading with each other. Every day is a market day somewhere in Nigeria. We feel that democracy goes hand in hand with free trade and freedoms that are enshrined in the Global Universal Declaration of Freedoms, and which is why we feel it is incumbent upon us also as the regional power to encourage a democracy, not just in West Africa, but in the continent as a whole. And we need partners in this endeavor. And democracy, as I keep saying, is a process. It's not an event. So you have to work at it, especially now when it's facing a serious threat. Development, of course, we want to grow our economy using agriculture, expanding our manufacturing base and infrastructure that would create jobs almost immediately. So we want to develop at a faster rate than the growth of our population. Demography, I've already touched on that. We are the largest nation in Africa, to become the third largest. So we need to ensure that our population peaks at the right time, so that in terms of dependency ratio, for now, 70% of our population is under the age of 43. So you can see, so picture, if you will, a nation full of Gen Zs and millennials and what have you, So we need to take cognizance of that. We need to partner again with other larger nations, and we need to be on the decision-making table. We need to be part of global governance, which is why we're agitating to become part of G20, to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council and so forth, so that we can speak out for others also on the continent with a big voice. We are the only permanent member of the African Union's Peace and Security Council. So it's a natural progression. Diaspora, of course, Nigerians are all over the world. They're succeeding, they're excelling, and we need to connect with them to first and foremost help change this negative perception about Nigeria and do away with false narratives, so that people will understand Nigeria better, so that we can partner better with other countries. So that's it in a nutshell.
Thank you very much, Minister. So I'm going to open it up to questions. I know we probably have some questions online, but first of all, before I take questions from the audience, I'll probably turn to Rich Michaels from the State Department if you have any questions or comments. Okay, thank you very much. Now, we have colleagues on both sides with microphones. Please, I encourage you to keep your question to a question. Keep it very brief, introduce yourself and your affiliation, and then you can ask the question.
Good morning, and thank you, Ambassador, for the vision for Nigerian foreign policy. My name is Benga. I represent Nigerian Center, local community center for Nigerian Americans here in Washington, D.C. I want to highlight the diaspora component of the strategy. I was wondering, does the strategy also take advantage of the opportunity in the United States, where a larger portion of Afro-Latinos and Black Americans are now tracing ancestry back to Nigeria? So can we expand the definition of Nigerian diaspora to include those communities?
Thank you very much. Those DNA tests are a godsend. So we're going to have more and more Nigerians, and the more the merrier. That's exactly what we need. Yes, absolutely. And you see, even before the 4Ds, the directors here will tell you that the Foreign Affairs Ministry has had the technical aid corps running for decades, where Nigeria supports African, Caribbean, and Pacific countries with teachers, with administrators, with clerks, with doctors, with nurses, and no strings attached. Nigeria has been doing that, so this is one of the unsung parts of Nigeria's foreign policy soft power. So we will continue to do that, of course, and this is also integrated in the efforts that we're making with that D that stands for diaspora as well.
Thank you. Have any other questions?
Ray Michael Bridgewater, President and CEO of Assembly of Petworth. As you look at the issues of food security and climate change, that means that you're looking at the issues of your health challenges in your country. What are your health challenges in your country, and how can medical mobile units, telehealth medical mobile units, make a difference?
Yeah, I would say that the biggest health challenge to Nigeria is malaria. And we have a Minister of Health that was the head of Gavi and returned specifically, to take up that position and implement the administration's robust plans, at the center of which is this fight against malaria. At the same time, you talked about telemedicine. Yeah. So, yeah, there are curricula being applied now in some of Nigeria's medical schools that incorporate telemedicine because you have syllabus that include that aspect of telemedicine, and that have been there are programs that have been. I'm trying to remember the name of one in particular that I know is already even being applied by one of the universities in Nigeria, where it's an aggregation of curricula from some of the leading medical schools in the world, and so they subscribe to it, and then it's implemented online. So it's a robust program, and it's being applied.
Thank you very much. Let me also encourage our audience online and those in the room, just being reminded that we can follow the conversation online using the hashtag Tuggar@Wilson or Tuggar in DC. Now, going back to the point you made about foreign policy being local or being influenced by local events, we have a question here from an online audience asking about your thoughts on the current economic concerns in Nigeria and how partnerships that we seek with the US or elsewhere can actually help address some of these economic challenges that we currently see in Nigeria today.
Well, there are a lot of ways. Even beginning with health, there's a lot of collaboration going on. We We're already getting quite a lot of support, activities of USAID, but beyond that, I would say trade and investment is key. I talked about developing infrastructure, Nigerian infrastructure, so there are a lot of ways that we can partner even further. Metals refining is one area. Nigeria has a lot of lithium that is being exported in the raw, processed, and then sold to other countries. We're trying to interest U.S. Private sector in investing in metals refining. Other countries have already started doing that. So, but like I said earlier, the more the merrier for us. So this is one key area. When you look at infrastructure, part of the problem has to do with risk. There's always talk of political risk and financial risk. Where others develop cold feet, we feel the United States and its private sector is in a position to meet Nigeria halfway towards de-risking investment, towards the U.S. Exim Bank can play, is already playing a very pivotal role, can do more when it comes to risk mitigation. And Nigeria is a country that is fortunate enough to have certain sectoral funds, if you will, not to be just spent, but to provide credit risk guarantees. And so that means we can meet countries halfway. So I see possible collaboration in that area. And then, of course, importantly, the U.S. Can easily be Nigeria's biggest partner when it comes to the issue of security, because there are certain restrictions through the Leahy law, for instance, that prohibit the sale of certain kinetic equipment to military and to our security agencies. This is something that that has to be reevaluated, because, as I said in my speech, Nigeria is possibly the first and last line of defense for the United States and the rest of the world. What is happening in our region, if you look at the population explosion that is taking place, the birth rate in the Sahel, in West Africa, is higher than most parts of the world. So moving into the future, if we don't secure that region using those homegrown solutions that we're talking about, multinational joint task force has proven to be much more effective than Sahel G5, for instance. Look at what Nigeria did with ECOMOG. Nigeria succeeded in peace building more than others in Sierra Leone, in Liberia. These are things that have to be replicated. So trade, investment, health, trade, investment, security, education, I could go on and on. It's a very vast area of discussion.
Mm-hmm. Minister, if I could just pick up that point that you made about the role Nigeria played in ECOMOG, the role Nigeria played in Liberia and Sierra Leone. Some will argue that over the past few years, it seems as if Nigeria has taken a back seat in its role, in its leadership role in diplomacy, in addressing security concerns in the region. And you've just outlined a new vision for foreign policy in the country. What could be done differently to address this concern? That it's been over years that people have said it seems Nigeria has taken a back seat. What is your vision in terms of how you move things forward to elevate Nigeria back to playing that role that it's supposed to play in the region?
Well, if you look at the Westphalian state system, countries are often restricted in how big a role they can play based on their economy, based on their military strength and based on the relationships that they have with other countries. So in the case of Nigeria, if we were seen to have withdrawn to a certain extent, given our impeccable record as leaders of ECOMOG and settling Liberia, Sierra Leone, restoring democracy in those countries, it also has to do with the limitations that we were facing. So Leahy Law, like I said, limited the kinetic weapons that we could get, even to serve as a deterrence to others, I think it was, well, this is the Wilson Center, but it was, I think, Teddy Roosevelt that said, tread softly but carry a big stick. So, to do that, you need you need those kinetic weapons as well too. So, yeah, but we're looking to change all of that because, and don't get me wrong, even at times when we seem to have receded in terms of projecting power and resolving problems, the problems of others, we still did a hell of a lot. We're unsung heroes when it comes to the transition in Gambia, when it comes to currently where you have a former president that we invited and relocated to Nigeria just to diffuse tension in one of our neighboring, a country in our region and all of that. So we continue to do that, but we can do much more with the support and partnership of countries like the United States.
So you're saying Nigeria is back under your watch?
Well, Nigeria was never away, but...
Ambassador Negroponte.
Thank you. Welcome, Mr. Minister. I had the opportunity to be our representative to the United Nations about 20 years ago and had the pleasure and privilege of working very closely with your delegation. I think it was Chief Banefo at that time, but we did a lot of work together. And the things you say about Sierra Leone, Liberia, which were success stories at that time, we all thought Sierra Leone was a basket case. When they briefed me on it the first time in 2001, there was, I think the government controlled a few square blocks in downtown Freetown. And several years later, order and the presence had been restored throughout the country. Very, very, very impressive. I agree with what you say about the Leahy rule. I think it ought to be revisited, including consideration of some of the harm that it's done to the ability of our friends around the world, including in your continent, to do things that they have to do. But the last point, and I guess there's a question in here somewhere, I'm not following your guidance, I apologize. But I think if you expand your outreach to countries like the United States. I know it's expensive and it requires effort and so forth, but I honestly believe, given the prospects for your country, the size of the population and the size of the diaspora, which you have mentioned several times in your presentation today, that if you make this presentation or your colleagues or your government make this kind of presentation around our country, you'll be pushing on an open door. And I honestly believe that if you can find a way to reach more of the American people outside, not only in Washington, but outside, which is important, of course, for political reasons, but beyond the borders and the confines of Washington, D.C., you'll be extremely well received and very popular. So good luck.
Thank you. We need it.
Thank you, Ambassador. So there's a question over there.
Good morning, Minister Tuggar, and welcome to D.C. I'm Ken Fielding. I'm the former director for Civil and Human Rights for the United Methodist Church, and in that capacity also a former United Nations delegate to Africa, the Ukraine, and the US-Mexico border. Currently, I'm at a technology company that does geospatial mapping in real time. We're a NASA technology company, and we're the United States government's premier interoperable technology for mapping climate change, population movement, health, and a lot of other case uses. So my question is, and my focus is, where or what is the current climate in Nigeria as a technology hub, the infrastructure for Nigeria to connect to emerging and also innovative technologies to partner to also serve, to allow technology to serve as a solution to malaria, to population movement, to water management, to food security, and a lot of other case uses.
Thank you.
Thank you. We are currently expanding our broadband cabling. We are on 5G now, so we have a 5G license that's been issued. And the Minister of Health, I think even quite recently, invited experts from around the world, and there was an event in Nigeria specifically dealing with the issue of application of technology, artificial intelligence to health solutions. So it's something that we want to tap into because we have a very youthful population that, everybody in Nigeria has a mobile phone. Doesn't matter how remote the village. So that, for one, unleashed so much potential, so much creativity in different sectors, in the medical field, even the application of blockchain to dispensing medication, even in rural areas for accountability and all that. So there's a lot of that happening. And then the other end of it is the payment end, because we have a very sophisticated payment system. We've had it since 1994. It's called the Nigeria Interbank Settlement System. As a matter of fact, it's what Africa is adopting as a whole. So that is the Pan-African payment system. It's modeled after Nigeria's interbank settlement system that is collectively owned by all the banks in Nigeria and the Central Bank of Nigeria. It's, not to take anything away from my Kenyan brothers and sisters, it was far more advanced than M-Pesa. Even when the world only knew about M-Pesa, NIBS was much, much more advanced, and it's, what actually even unleashed all that fintech revolution that took place, and, we ended up with unicorns and all sorts of huge gains. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So there's one question over here. Sir, you've already asked the question, so I have to open it up to, okay.
I appreciate your presence here, Mr. Minister. Thank you. I'm Leon Weintraub, a retired member of the U.S. Foreign Service who had the good fortune years ago to serve in Nigeria. You had mentioned several times the Global South and possibly interest in greater representation in the Security Council. I'm wondering if, as a leading member of the Global South, perhaps in conjunction with others, some countries that do come to mind, or perhaps India or Brazil, if you have a strategy for perhaps a permanent seat on the Security Council with or without a veto. This is a worthy aspiration. I'm wondering if you have a way forward to perhaps help that move along.
Yes, thank you. Yeah, we'll take the seat with the veto. Thank you very much. But yeah, you're right. We are talking to other Global South countries and partners. Nigeria was actually invited to India to participate in the G20 summit. I think was it the first time we were participating? Maybe second time, yeah. But India did that, so that it would give us the opportunity to engage on such issues and collab. And of course, Brazil is currently also the chair of, it's leading the G20. Again, there are discussions going on between us. So yes, we're trying to, you have certain propositions such as Ezulwini and others that, not everyone has quite agreed to, but it is generally agreed that the UN Security Council needs to be opened up, and that continents such as Africa need representation, and other regional powers also perhaps should be part of it. So what remains is to decide whether these seats should be permanent or not permanent, and how many and all of that. But I think it's an area where the United States can play the leadership role and push for a Nigeria to become a permanent member of the UN Security Council, as well as others. And I think, for me, I've gone around, I've talked to several countries and several leaders, and I am yet to meet anyone that says, no, there shouldn't be a change or there shouldn't be a reform of the UN Security Council.
Thank you very much. Your question?
Good morning, Ambassador. My name is Afua Osei from Foreign Policy Magazine, and my question is around partnership negotiation. We hear a lot about companies and governments looking to enter into countries like Nigeria to access resources, to access talent. But the question is always in the details of those negotiations, and we hear 10 to 15 years later that many times those deals may not have been best for the host country. So my question is, as you are negotiating, as you're having these conversations, how do you ensure that you and your team are putting Nigeria first, Nigeria's values and priorities first, and ensuring that the deals benefit all parties involved? Thank you.
Well, to begin with, Nigeria has a very purposive constitution that protects the citizens. So the citizenry of Nigeria come first. If you look at Section 2 of Nigeria's constitution, is the fundamental objectives and directive principles of state policy. It's quite robust in its defense of the interests of the Nigerian people. So Nigeria is not the sort of country, it's not like taking a toy from a kid, so, and then if you look at our laws as well, if you look at the Land Use Act, so it's not the sort of place that you come and land is expropriated, and then you are exploited. And I think we have to get out of this mindset of infantilizing African countries, as if, they don't know what is good for them. They need the protection of others. I mean, this was Hegel, centuries ago, looking down on the African being childlike and needs protection and all of that. We've gone way beyond that. We're talking broadband here and 5G. So, and you're talking about a country that has been producing oil since 1956, 57. So we have that depth when it comes to lawyers, when it comes to accountants that have worked in international law firms and international accounting firms and all of that. So when you're negotiating with Nigeria, I think you need to come and negotiate with them. Then you'll understand what I'm talking about. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Tony?
Thank you. Ambassador, welcome to Washington. I apologize for being late, but I had a previous appointment. with the New Zealand foreign minister, incoming New Zealand foreign minister, country that punches above its weight internationally, I think it's fair to say. I was a lecturer at ABU, Amadou Bello University, in the early 1990s, and I remember a day when it was an era when it was very safe to travel across northern Nigeria, unprotected and welcomed by communities far and wide. And unfortunately, the internal security environment has deteriorated, I think, in most people's estimations. Of course, that brings lack of confidence among Nigerians and foreign investors. And I'd like to get I know you're not Home Affairs Minister and you're not Defense Minister, but obviously it impacts your relations externally as well. So I'm wondering, what is the President Tinubu's plans on securing Nigeria for Nigerians and also making Nigeria a safe place to invest, that the security issues, which I think right now are of high concern to many of us, is something that we can manage.
Thank you, Tony.
Thank you. So beyond, of course, training and equipment and getting the Lihi law and others revisited, the Tinubu administration is tackling the root causes of insecurity. And that's why one of the Ds is development. And which is why also we have, for instance, the Renewed Hope Infrastructure Fund, because we feel that one of the major root causes of insecurity is unemployment, restless youth. So, and you see the good thing about infrastructure is from the moment you start the construction of a railroad or gas pipeline or a road itself, or electric cabling and all of that, you have to employ labor directly from those communities. So that takes people off the streets, off the forests where a lot of these activities take place. But let me also say that we must also bear in mind that Nigeria, like the US, has several tiers of government. So if you look at what is going on at the federal level, then you must also look at the subnational level, state governments, and importantly, local governments. And the Constitution is structured in such a way that it gives part of the responsibility of local governments to the state governments and governors and the state legislature. And so they have a joint account that they're meant to operate jointly. And then the state governments are also responsible for elections. So routine elections have to also take place because you have state independent electoral commissions that are not under the purview of the federal government. They're not like the Independent National Electoral Commission. And for the federal government or the president or the Tinubu administration to do anything about this, it probably requires a constitutional amendment. And so the problem now is, the $1 million question is, who is the Gorbachev amongst the governors that would agree to unravel their own power structure. So this is where we have challenges.
So if I could ask a follow-on question sort of linked to Tony's questions on security, and I know it's probably something that you might not be able to have a direct answer to, but when we look at insecurity across the country, in different parts of the country, more in different parts of the country, there is an ongoing debate in Nigeria now about state police, and if this is something that needs to be instituted to at least address just the growing insecurity. As you've clearly laid out, there are different tiers of government between federal, state, and local government. And insecurity manifests itself at different levels at each of these levels. And so there is this ongoing debate and discussion now about having a state police system, since now all security answers to the center. Would love to know your thoughts about that, because as you referenced in your address, a lot of the local activities that happen also impacts how Nigeria projects itself in the region. And a second question alongside that too as well was, the D, development. I think sometimes when people see the rise in insecurity, in parts of Nigeria, we see that, yes, there might be a correlation to unemployment or poverty, but not necessarily always a straight correlation. Not always necessarily a straight causation. There's a correlation, but not a causation. And so some say we have to bring the question of governance to the table too as well. And this is a question coming from our online audience, basically saying as we look at the question of strengthening democracy in Nigeria and across the sub-region, this is one of the areas that the US government has signaled its partnership, has signaled its support to partner with countries in strengthening democratic values in the region. How is Nigeria, I think it's going back to the other D that you have in your 4D framework, how is Nigeria working closely with the US and other actors in the region to address concerns of weakening democracy?
So with state police, perhaps I should speak as a politician and not the foreign minister of Nigeria, because I have contested elections in Nigeria, I have won elections in Nigeria, I've lost elections in Nigeria, and I personally am not a big fan of state police, because I just finished describing how state governments and governors need to do more in terms of allowing local governments to function. So picture, if you will, a situation where those same governors also have their own police controlled directly by them. So I don't know that they're all going to be going to approach it in the same manner. And so if I don't want a situation where opposition party members, it doesn't matter whether they belong to my party or not, to have to be confronted with certain restrictions that could be placed on them using state police. So that is my major concern, but it can be structured in such a way perhaps that the state police are not in the under the absolute control of governors. So it's important that we're careful in adopting that. With development, you see, I think it's important also to understand that when we talk about insecurity in Nigeria, it's not every single place in Nigeria that is insecure. In fact, Nigeria is not more insecure than many other countries that are attracting huge investments that equally have a high degree of risk. And in fact, some of those countries have higher political risk than Nigeria, because Nigeria has had 7 successive elections. We've had all sorts of transitions from one individual to the other at the presidential level, from one political party to the other. We elected a president. He died in office. The system was tested. The vice president took over. He served, finished the term, ran an election, contested an election, won, contested another one, lost. Opposition party won, and all of that. So when it comes to political risk, I think we're faring much better than other places where, maybe they have administrative hegemonies or outright dictatorships, but that never seems to be an impediment to investments. But we also have special economic zones. We have industrial parks with tax incentives that are secure. There is infrastructure available. There is you have gas pipelines supplying electricity and all of that. So for the investors, that is heaven. So with democracy, how we're working jointly with the United States, again, it's linked to development. It's also awareness. It's also, I think we need to do more when it comes to the issue of the use of social media, because you have social media has been weaponized, false narratives, dissemination of false information, the use of democratic norms to undermine democracy itself. So this is something that I think we need to focus more on.
Thank you very much. And I think to that point, there is a question that came in online to a point you made about messaging. Someone here would like to know how you are going to promote diplomacy, telling Nigeria's story through the creative industry. Is there a strategy for this?
Absolutely. There is a huge strategy, and it's called the Ministry of Creative Industries. So the Tinubu administration created a standalone ministry specifically for that, with a minister and a bureaucracy supporting it. It is also why in negotiating trade deals, we are taking up the issue of intellectual property. We're very concerned about that, because you have a lot of creative Nigerians. You can see how Afrobeats has more or less become the drum beat of the soundtrack of the decade. We've got Nollywood. Some say second, some say third largest film industry. And another area that we are not even taking into account as often is the fashion industry, garments and all the beautiful attire coming out of Nigeria, and which incidentally employs more than many of these other sectors. So the garment sector, and that is. So again, when it comes to intellectual property, we have a lot of creative, young creative Nigerians that are doing wonderful things on the internet, applying digital technology. There's the whole space of non-fungible tokens, where again, this issue of ownership and copyrights and all of that is weighs heavy. And then we're also robustly taking on the issue of restitution of stolen cultural properties. So again, when we negotiate such issues with stolen cultural properties, it's not enough for the items to be returned. If you make digital copies of them, then again, that itself is worth something, and it's something that we want to protect Nigeria and Nigerians from exploitation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you very much. Do we have any other questions in the room? Let me go take this question that we have online, and it's on climate sustainability or adaptation. So this person would like to know how Nigeria is balancing climate sustainable development and growth, especially in the extractive industries. So rather than commenting on the clashes that we might see in these environments, how is Nigeria working on collaboration in these spaces, be it in the Niger Delta or other parts of the country?
How is Nigeria working on collaboration?
Collaborative activities in these spaces to pursue or to promote climate sustainable or climate adaptive projects?
Well, for one, net zero is 2060, our net zero target. The government has a national coordinating office on climate change. And it's looking at not just what the progress that we've made, huge progress in terms of emissions when it comes to the petroleum industry, where emissions have gone down drastically, and where we also have a new Petroleum Industry Act that is compliant to all the cutting edge provisions of emissions reductions. This is why Nigeria is also looking to utilize more of its gas, because Nigeria is a gas zone with a bit of oil in it. So we have more gas than we have oil, and that's why we are constructing these gas pipelines. As far as Nigeria is concerned, gas is a transition fuel, and we want to use it responsibly to power our industrialization. We continue, but at the same time, we're also improving our energy mix. So we're doing a lot on solar, and not just buying solar panels and putting them, and that's it. No, we are researching, we're developing our capacity to produce solar panels, to produce inverters, and we have a National Agency of Science, Engineering, Infrastructure, doing a lot of things, and it's going on not just at the federal level, but also at the state level of state governments. So and then of course local governments. We also have a Rural Electrification Agency that's doing a lot in that space. So we're looking at solar. We're looking at, of course, hydro. We have the two major rivers, so we're looking to expand that. There are loads of projects going on there. And then we're looking to partner with countries like the United States in developing a national hydrogen strategy so that we can utilize that solar power, the hydro, to produce hydrogen that we can export. And then domestically, we can turn to blue hydrogen that can be used for domestic consumption.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Minister. I just made a note on the point you made about Nigeria being a gas zone with a bit of oil in it. And I just made a note of that to myself. For many years, I've been working with organizations that have been focusing on gas flaring in the Niger Delta region of Nigeria. And I think it's important to know that there is some work being done now to stop the gas flaring in that region. I want to go back to a point that you made in your address about great power competition. Now, when we look across the newspapers today and coverage in West Africa, there's always that story of concerns about Russia's presence in the region. We've seen the three countries in West Africa that have asked or put in the acts to leave ECOWAS. We've also seen across the region citizens questioning the legitimacy of ECOWAS, and not only ECOWAS, but regional economic bodies across the region. With rising constitutional changes of government, with the coups that we've seen in West Africa as well, and with Nigeria's role now as a chairperson or chairing ECOWAS, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this, especially with the concerns of powers like Russia and others taking up space in the region. So we'd love to hear your thoughts, and going back to that, the diplomacy and democracy in the vision that you've laid out. How is Nigeria working in this space or going to engage the other countries in the region in this space, given the concerns that we see not only within the countries themselves, but also with citizens in the region and the way they see ECOWAS's role?
Well, I think, it's simple and straightforward. If the 3 or 4 countries, Niger, Mali, Burkina Faso, say that, well, I shouldn't say the countries, the regimes that are currently in power there, if they justify their coming with using the premise that they came to drive out the French that had colonized them before and that are now applying neocolonialism to exploit them, then I don't think it would be foolhardy to replace the French or whoever else with somebody else. Why can't you do it on your own? So it doesn't matter if it's Russia or any other country. I think the best way forward, just like I said in the speech, is the homegrown solutions, and then we can partner with others. And if you want, you can partner with more than one country. But the idea of having boots on the ground, private military companies or mercenaries to secure regimes in these countries, or to play some role under the guise of fighting terrorism, I don't think it's a good idea, and I think it further causes instability in the region. And you see, the problem with military regimes is when they come in and there's a fanfare and euphoria and celebration, what ultimately happens once they settle down is they start to compete with each other for control of the capital, and they pay less attention to the periphery, to border areas, which is where Africa has most of these problems with terrorism, with criminal gangs, organizations, with even human trafficking, and so on and so forth. And that's where we need, the cross-border areas of Africa, West Africa. There are vast spaces where, you need more focus on. And if the attention of the military that are supposed to be fighting the terrorists and protecting the sovereignty of such countries in those border areas is turned on the contests in the capital, then clearly nobody is minding the gates.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you speak a little bit too as well about to a point on citizen discontent or questioning the legitimacy of regional economic bodies, groups like ECOWAS or the others that are across the continent?
I guess there is a number of factors. There are a number of factors why that is happening. One is perhaps the fact that quite a number of them have veered away from their original raison d'etre, the reason why they were actually even created. If you look at ECOWAS, the name, it's eponymous, Economic Community of West African States. So it's first and foremost economy, and secondly it's about the community, the people. So it's not about the regimes, the systems of government and all of that. It's focusing on the people and their economic well-being, and ultimately economic integration of the region. The bigger the market, the more presumably the benefits. And if we're talking also about the African Continental Free Trade Area, the approach to it is first and foremost, to have the regional integration of the ECOWASs, the ECAs, the SADC, and then use that to further integrate the markets for the benefit of all. So I think there's a deviation from that in part. Secondly, sometimes there's a misunderstanding of what the function of these regional economic communities is meant to be. some tend to believe that they are there to serve certain political purposes, beyond their remit. So we need to go back to the basics. Of course, there's no way they would completely stay away from the politics. We've seen how they're used to diffuse tension and also to have separate structures for peacekeeping, for instance, and all that. But they are not to provide some sort of regional government to replace, the Westphalian states.
Mm-hmm. The point you made about ECOWAS, the economy, and then the people, putting the people back at the center of the conversation. Any other questions in the room? There's one question here and another question there.
I'm David Smith of The Guardian. I just wonder if you could talk about the current state of Nigeria's relationship with China and whether you see it trying to compete with the US in Nigeria and beyond.
Okay. Let's also take the second question because we have only a few minutes so we can round up together.
Hello, everyone. Hello, Minister. I just wanted to know, as far as tourism, I got in a bit late, and I just wanted to know tourism among the countries in Africa. What would you say about tourism?
Okay, thank you. Whether China is competing with the US in Nigeria, well, Nigeria's approach is strategic autonomy. We have a heritage of non-alignment, so we get along with the US, we get along with China, we get along with Russia, we get along with the United Kingdom. We get along with everyone, and I don't think having a relationship with one affects the other. Our relationship with China, of course, through that Nigeria has benefited immensely from infrastructure and development, which is, like I said, much needed infrastructure. What we've found is that, for instance, with European groups that often compete with China for infrastructure contracts or projects, they often lose out because it's open competition. We're a democratic nation. We've got public procurement laws. So there's a bid, there's a tender. Every country is free to come and compete. What tends to happen oftentimes is even when European groups beat out the Chinese in such tenders, when it comes to the issue of funding, even when Nigeria is prepared to grant a sovereign guarantee, the European export credit agencies shy away, and they're stuck. And then you see European engineering, procurement, construction companies going to China looking for funding. So that's completely out of our hands. So it's not something that, which is why we keep saying that perhaps there's a need for the EU to have an export credit agency. And of course, the United States is almost a continent. So, when they come in and participate in such bids, such tender rounds for infrastructure, we feel that they would be in a better position to take up the opportunities for provided through sovereign guarantees and what have you. Yeah.
And there was the question on tourism.
Oh yeah, sorry. Tourism, well, for us, it's not one of our strong points because East Africa is more renowned for tourism. It's got the infrastructure, it's got the experience and the the manpower and all of that. But which is not to say that for Nigeria, tourism is not paramount. We have a tourism industry also at the federal level. We have a different form of tourism to, let's say, East Africa and Southern Africa. So it's not about, not necessarily about safaris. We do have wildlife parks, but we are increasingly seeing, receiving visitors coming for Nollywood tourism, for to experience music, Afro beats, and all of that. And it's something that we want to develop even further. But the beauty of it is that Africa has a lot to offer. So what East Africa has to offer, East and Southern Africa, is different from what West Africa has to offer, and of course North Africa and Central Africa as well. So it's a mixture. It's something, again, that I believe the African Union has certain frameworks to continue to utilize in developing further.
Thank you very much, sir. Unfortunately, we cannot take any more questions. We are already at time. But I really want to thank you for sharing your morning here with us. I know it's raining outside, and you've made the time to come out here today. Thank you for your address and for the points that you made in your address. We understand that this is your first official visit in Washington, D.C. As you continue your other meetings, we wish you good luck to your other meetings, and we look forward to welcoming you back again here to the Wilson Center. So everybody, please join me in thanking the Minister.